everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today, you're stuck with me. I'm going to be doing what I think is going to end up being a two-part episode to give an overview and insight into addiction and how we handle addiction in family cases, in family courts. This is a very complicated area, and I've been trying to distill it down as I've thought about bringing you some overarching information about this. So you can start, whether you're a family member going through this, a parent, or you are a professional involved in working in cases that have these dynamics. There is really a lot to think about. And so I think we'll see how this goes today, but I'm thinking it's going to end up being two. Stay tuned and we'll see at the end how long this takes me to get through. Also, if you're watching me on video, you're going to see that I'm relying on some notes because I have a lot of um, details I need to get into basically in terms of definitions and things like that. And so I just want to make sure that I get it right. So I am coming today from a offsite setting as well. So if you're watching online on YouTube, you can see that I'm in a sort of cabiny area. So I, from time to time, try to get away and get away from this hard work of the cases and get to a place where I can actually think a little bit and reflect a little bit. So that's where I am today as I record this. All right, so let's get into it. I think that the first thing you need to know, and hopefully, if you've been following the podcast, you will have listened to or watched the two episodes that will have already released, one from a woman named Cheryl and another from a man named Mike, both of whom tell their stories from really different sides of the case in each of their situations in terms of how alcohol use, specifically, but also drug use and things like that have affected their families and the dynamics in their individual cases. This is a very chronic situation in family courts that we have cases that have issues of addiction or allegations of addiction or allegations just of misuse. So that can be a variety of things, but usually it's alcohol. Sometimes, I mean, I practice largely in Colorado. We have a lot of marijuana use that's become more common nationwide and internationally as well. Sometimes it's other drugs, but certainly the most common one is alcohol. Although I would say that the principles that I'm sharing with you today really do apply to a lot of different types of addictive behaviors. So at some point, the question of testing arises, depending on the level of misuse and addictive behavior that we are facing. And so let me go through what those general options are. Okay, so first of all, if we have an immediate need for a child's safety, we generally start using, and especially if it's alcohol, we will generally start using testing for the alcohol use real time. Okay, those different options that we use are, for example, I'll just give you two of them that are the leading ones that we use in Colorado. So for breathalyzers, there are two main brands that we use, at least in Colorado and I think nationally, and those are SoberLink and Backtrack, capital B, capital A, capital C, Track, TRACK, which is to look for blood alcohol content. And they are very sophisticated breathalyzers. You can find more information on those online, but basically, they allow for real time protection of kids because you pick a one or two people basically who are going to receive that real-time information back, in terms of whether or not it's like a green light, a yellow light, or a red light, for example, that gives you what that blood alcohol content is. There's usually different provisions that we do to say that if you have a positive and you have a few minutes to retake your test, basically because every once in a while there's a false positive, although that's not very common. And so, there's things like mouthwash or things like that that can set that off. And so we go ahead and allow for a secondary test. There are different suggestions about how frequently people have to do that testing. I think it's better to use, now I'll say with the caveat, I'm not a substance use expert myself, but in working with them, I think that I've seen best practice be that we do sober testing on these breathalyzers very frequently. So you'll see on the websites that there are different programs you can buy or different packages that don't allow for as many tests. I don't suggest those. I suggest the ones that allow for unlimited testing. And that's because really you're trying to show that there is no drinking going on. from, test to test. I would say that we can use a substance use evaluation, which is the more extensive use of an expert who can come in. And I'm going to spend a lot of time right now talking through what that looks like so that you understand what a substance use evaluation is and kind of what the output of that is. In Colorado, at least, there's again, you can get these drive-by kind of substance use and I'll say mental health evaluations. I call them drive-bys because the ones you don't wanna rely on are the ones that are only based on self-reporting. Okay, you can imagine. The court says, or the other parent or the other attorney says, "I need this person to go get a substance use evaluation," or "I need this person to go get a mental health evaluation," or both. And that party or that party's attorney will say, "Yeah, just go get one. Go get one wherever you want." Okay, this is a very poor way to go about this because they have almost no usefulness if it is only based on that party, the person who has the problem allegedly, providing feedback as to what the problem is. Okay, you can imagine why, because it's not extensive enough. And so people who do that are wasting a lot of time and they're wasting money. They're usually very inexpensive. They're usually only based on a couple hours of work. Somebody will go in and say, I need you, my ex is being a jerk. Getting accused of this abuse or this kind of a misuse of substances. And I need you to I'm getting told to do a mental health evaluation and a substance use evaluation or both, both or one or the other. And they'll set an appointment for the person and the person will come in and do an hour or two with the provider. Even if that person is a mental health professional, it's still going to result in a few page document that says, I interviewed this person on this day. Maybe I did, or maybe I didn't look at medical records. But based on this history, I can say that the person has it under control or the person should, you know, I don't know. There could be a variety of recommendations in it, but ultimately it will show that there is only one person providing that information or people that are only aligned with that one person. Okay, you can understand how that isn't very helpful. Okay, so when I get on a case and I have those sorts of reports, I'll say this is not sufficient. And I will go to the court and say, we need a much better, more solid substance use evaluation or mental health evaluation or both. Now, we want to make sure that when you go to somebody who claims to be a substance use evaluator, the person really should have some background in both mental health or social work. Okay. So it could be a therapeutic background, could be a social work background, and that they are a licensed addiction counselor and have that kind of training. You're often going to see different like labels by their name of kind of what their background is, and it's usually something involving, certified addiction counseling. So the DSM-5 is that book we hear cited kind of a lot about kind of what are the disorders and how do we define what disorders, look like. So this substance use disorder diagnostic schedule provides for both a lifetime and current review of problems, behaviors, and issues related to substance use and substance use disorders with the time frame for current problems being in the previous 12 months in accordance with the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria. And then they'll specify what criteria are met for alcohol use disorder, and going through the number of criteria in the last 12 months. Okay. And so this will explain, and I'll get into those DSM-5 criteria here in a minute. Then we talked through, for example, this alcohol use disorders identification test, the audit. This is described as a reliable and valid standardized self-report screening instrument that emphasizes the identification of hazardous drinking rather than long-term dependence and adverse drinking consequences. It can be easily faked as to appear that there are no current alcohol problems.